This is Dish and Dirt with Gary Pickren, South Carolina's only podcast dedicated to the real estate agent craft. And now, the host of Dish and Dirt, Gary Pickren.
And greetings and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Dish and Dirt. I'm your often opinionated, rarely wrong host, Gary Pickren, coming to you from the beautiful downtown Columbia, South Carolina offices of Blair, Cato, Pickren, Castelline. This, the second week, October 2025. I thought this week we'd be talking about the Compass and Anywhere potential merger. I thought that would probably be our topic for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Surprisingly, it is not. And in fact, what has overtaken that topic this week is Zillow. Is Zillow finally in trouble? Could there be some lawsuits or maybe even more likely some government interaction that could change how Zillow operates as a platform, as a portal? I don't know. We're going to look at it. There's a lot of lawsuits and there's a lot of government interaction out here the last month that really makes you start wondering, what in the world is Zillow going to do moving forward? In fact, one of the articles that I found on the internet was titled Zillow's very, 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 very bad month. And they did have a very bad month with a lot of legal problems. In fact, if you were a lawyer in their legal department, you'd be very busy right now. And you would also be very concerned as to where some of these cases may eventually lead you. And will it cause structural and major changes at Zillow and how they operate? Maybe, maybe not. And that's going to be a long time coming before we'll find out the answers to these. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at Zillow and we're going to see what the major lawsuits and risks they have against them. There's 3 lawsuits and there's 2 government actions, and how these 2 government actions might affect what you do as a real estate agent, whether you're a quote unquote Zillow agent or not. Now, when I asked ChatGTP today, was Zillow in trouble? This is the answer that AI gives us. It says, yes, Zillow is facing significant trouble. I use the word significant trouble, with multiple lawsuits from the FTC and several states alleging anti-competitive practices in its rental listings, and separate lawsuits from Compass for allegedly gatekeeping home listings. These actions, combined with Zillow's past failures with its iBuying business Zillow Offers, which led to heavy losses and massive workforce reduction in 2021, put the company in a precarious legal and competitive position. So you can see that even AI thinks things are going less than peachy over at Zillow. In fact, they are talking about lawsuits, government interaction, and bad business decisions. I remember about 10 years ago, I was standing in my parking lot here at Blair, Cato, Pickren, Castelline, and I was talking to John Bolas, who was the owner-operator of the Columbia Century 21 at the time. And he said, what do you think we need to do about Zillow? And as Keyshawn Johnson used to say, never heard of them. Who are you talking about? What is a Zillow? Never heard of a Zillow. Zillow had already been operating for many years across the United States, but had not made its way into South Carolina at that point. And he explained to me how the MLS was essentially giving his IDX feed access to Zillow so that Zillow could broadcast all that on a website. It would basically accumulate all the listings on the website and just be another place where a consumer could find listings. And he feared that it would supplant the MLS and maybe even real estate agents. Well, in some ways it has, in fact, supplanted the MLS, not completely, but it is, in fact, the first place that most homeowners go to find real estate. May not be the first place real estate agents go to look for listings, but it certainly is the first place that homeowners and home buyers are going to. People are going there to find values. People are going there out of curiosity to see what their neighbors' houses are selling for. And people are using it to also find houses in areas they might want to look at. The one good thing about Zillow is if I'm in Columbia, South Carolina, and want to move to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, in the past, I'd have to try to find a bunch of different websites of agents or brokers down there. Now I can go to one place where it's all accumulates in one platform, and I can look and find Zillow's and find all of the listings in Myrtle Beach. And I can see what houses are going for, and I can look at other houses in the neighborhood to see what they sold for, and I can have a lot more information. So in a lot of ways, Zillow has made the consumer more informed, giving them better information, more timely information, more complete information. And so it's made it better for the consumer. And I think that also helps the seller, because as a seller, if you're selling property in Myrtle Beach in the 90s, you're only selling it by what your agent is able to push out in the local MLS. But now I can push out my house through Zillow and other similar platforms to people all over the world. And in a market like Sumter or Columbia that relies on heavy military movement, it certainly helps service members to be able to be at Fort Hood or at Dulles Air Force Base, to be able to, you go into Zillow and look for properties in whatever town they might be considered for a PCS. And so in that way, it is good. So let's take a second here and go down memory lane and talk about where Zillow is today and where it came from. Zillow is worth right around $20 billion, $19.626 billion. So a $20 billion company. And it does have annual revenue of $2.236 billion. And that was as of 2024. And I think their numbers are looking even better this year. So they're producing close to $2.25 billion of revenue every year with a value somewhere around 20. And that just continues to go up. As y'all know, it generates most of its revenue through its sales of advertisement to property management companies, ad sales to mortgage lenders, as well as premier services it offers to real estate agents. And it is that premier service for the real estate agent that is going to result in one of these lawsuits that we're going to talk about. Without a doubt, Zillow is the nation's #1 portal for real estate. It's not even close. They average 87 million monthly visitors. That's correct. 87 million monthly visitors, which without a doubt makes it the #1 most visited real estate website in the country. In fact, 2 out of the top 4 real estate websites in the country are owned by Zillow Group, the other one being Trulia. Zillow is so big and has so many visitors that you can add up number 2 through 9 and include Trulia in those numbers. And the numbers that Zillow creates in 1 month surpasses the other 9, including its own other Trulia. To give you an example, Realtor.com is number 2, and they average 29 million visitors. That's a third, barely a third of what Zillow gets. Coldwell Banker, one of the nation's leading real estate brokerages, is 10th, and it's just under 1 million. So 187th of what Zillow brings in a month in terms of visitors. A lot of people don't really understand where Zillow came from. It was funded by a guy named Rich Barton. Rich Barton worked at Microsoft at the time, and he wanted to change the real estate industry and transform the sector. And so he formed a company in 2004, and then he launches a website in 2006. So it's been out almost 19 years. The initial concept was to provide consumers with property information and valuations. Thus, the Zestimates were born. And they wanted to do this for every house, not just for listings. That was truly their key differentiator. Other people had put listings on with their values. Where they were able to differentiate themselves was by putting the Zestimate out so you could see the value of your house, even if you didn't go list it. Now, the problem was Zestimates in the beginning were wildly off, 20, 30, 40% off. They were never anywhere close. They seem to be better now. I don't know how close they truly are now, but in the early days, they were very bad. I would assume with AI, they're probably a lot more accurate than they were when they first began. The other thing that Zillow was able to capitalize on was the voyeuristic aspect of this. People wanted to see other people's houses, what they were worth, what they looked like, maybe see in the house that they were listing pictures at some other time. And so that was one of the things that allowed Zillow to expand. And in fact, I was talking to a lawyer at lunch this morning about this, and she said the same thing. Oh, I love Zillow because it allows me to see what my friends and neighbors' houses are worth. In 2008, Zillow introduced its first mortgage marketplace called a Mortgage Marketplace. And then in 2008, they also launched its Zillow iPhone app, and it was followed quickly by Android as well as a Windows mobile app. About 2 years later, after its launch, Zillow did add listings for homes for sale. In July of 2011, Zillow does go public for the first time with its IPO on the NASDAQ, and they trade under the symbol of Z. So let's talk about some of the biggest acquisitions they've had to date. First, they started in 2011 with Postlets. In 2012, it was Agent Folio. 2014-15 was Trulia. 2015 was Dotloop. 2018 was Mortgage Lenders of America. And then 2021 was Showtime. So you can see they are in your space. In the realtor or real estate agent space, they are heavily involved in many of the programs that you use. They actually own most of the programs that you use as a real estate agent. If you subscribe to MN News or Housing Wire or any of the other trade news aggregators, you've probably seen the articles already talking about Zillow and what's going on. Jim Dalrymple, who writes at MN News, said this week. A week is come and gone, and I think the takeaway since fall has begun is that we're sort of seeing different themes emerging in the news each week. Last week, the theme was the big Compass Anywhere merger. But this week, and despite continued coverage of that deal, attention shifted abruptly to Zillow, which is facing growing pressure on multiple fronts. The pressure is coming from the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, multiple state officials, attorney generals, and from the rival CoStar. And of course, in the background, the Compass lawsuit remains, and Compass remains an adversary to Zillow as well. It's quite a lot. And he is not wrong. It is quite a lot. In my research, what I found was that we are basically staring at 5 attacks against Zillow right now that are problematic. Number one is Compass's lawsuit over the private listing bans. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. As promised, I talked about the flex agent tactics. The lawyers who brought the Morrell lawsuit, which is akin to the Sitza Burnett lawsuit, they have brought this case against the flex agent tactics. CoStar has sued over copyright infringements. Just this past week, the FTC filed a lawsuit on the rental advertising program of Zillow. And now multiple attorney generals are also suing over the FTC lawsuit. What I'm going to do today is I want to give you a brief overview of the 5 lawsuits. I'm not going to get too detailed in them. I'm going to talk about them briefly and then talk about how each lawsuit could be a threat to you as a real estate agent. So we're going to start with a Compass lawsuit against Zillow that is about the private listing bans. As you know, if you've listened to this show at all, I am a huge supporter of clear cooperation. I think the NAR policy on clear cooperation is one of the best policies that NAR has. What clear cooperation does is it requires you within 24 hours of marketing or advertising the property, it must be on the multiple listing service. The reason is so everybody gets a fair shot to see the property, and the whole market will set the market price for your seller and not just a select group of real estate agents. People forget that clear cooperation came out of a lawsuit in California over this exact issue where real estate brokerages were shopping property in-house, never putting them on the multiple listing, getting both sides of the transaction. And then the homeowner was finding out later that they could have sold the property for a lot more had it gone on the market. And that's why CCP was born. Nothing's changed. So I don't know why we're trying to get rid of CCP. Nothing's changed in the marketplace to change that dynamic. In fact, it's actually gotten worse. It's not as if we've had an evolution in our marketplace and so we no longer need CCP. In fact, if we don't have CCP, we know without a shadow of a doubt we're going to have fair housing problems. Just are. I mean, unless a large brokerage has a large concentration of minority real estate agents servicing minority real estate consumers, then consumers are going to be left out. So if you're a minority-owned brokerage and you work mainly with minority real estate buyers, then your buyers will never see properties, and that's going to create a fair housing issue. The other issue is if you're a small broker and 40 or 50% of all listings are controlled by Compass and its group, and all of them go in-house for 30 days, then your clients aren't going to see a large majority of the listings until most of them are gone. And what I find very interesting about that is Compass brags that they're the biggest brokerage, and so your listings will be shopped to the most agents, the biggest brokerage, and so forth. But we know through statistics from the NAR, that's like 76% of real estate agents didn't sell anything last year. I don't care how many agents that Compass has. Theoretically, if you look at the numbers NAR provides us, about 76% of them didn't sell anything. 24% of their agents did. We're going to shop this in-house to 24% of their agents. You start dwindling the numbers down, it's tens of thousands of agents that will be seeing these listings, not hundreds of thousands of agents. And that does absolutely limit the number of agents and people seeing your listings. Never mind the whole fact that when they advertise hundreds of thousands of Compass agents will see your property, how many of those are in your market? What do I care if people outside my market see the listing? I need people in my market who are looking in my market. If I have an agent who's in Nebraska and she doesn't have a client in Nebraska looking to move to Columbia, South Carolina, what do I care that she can see my listing? I need people who can see my listing who want to buy my house. What they've done now is Zillow passed a rule that says if you privately market your listings, then you're never allowed to come on our platform. And that really goes against what Compass is trying to do, which is Compass is trying to market all of their properties, 100% of them, in-house for 30 days. And they do it under this BS guise of, oh, this is for consumer choice. It has nothing to do with consumer choice. And anytime Robert Refkin says it has consumer choice, he's full of shit. And everybody knows that. If he would just come out and be honest and say this is about Compass trying to make money on both sides of the deal, then I could at least listen to the guy. But when you're going to bold-face come out with this BS saying that, oh, we're doing it for consumer choice, it's garbage. How many of your consumers have ever asked you to stay off of MLS? How many of you said, hey, I want to list my property, but I don't want you to advertise it anywhere. I just want you to somehow miraculously find a buyer without ever trying to advertise or market my house or put it on the MLS? Quite the contrary. Most of your clients are calling you probably within an hour of you getting the listing, want to know why it's not up on Zillow yet. That's where your consumer wants you. Your consumer wants you to be on Zillow. Now, keep in mind, I'm no fan of Zillow. I'm not here arguing Zillow's side because I like it. I just think Refkin's full of it. And his whole argument in this particular case is crap. But what he says is the lawsuit's about protecting consumer choice. No one company should have the power to ban agents or listings simply because they don't follow the company's business model. Well, no one's trying to ban listings. They're just not going to be able to put them on their websites. That doesn't prevent you from putting it on the MLS and anywhere else. When you want the benefits of Zillow, you just don't want to follow by their rules. He says that's not competition, it's coercion. Again, you don't have to use Zillow, Robert. If you don't want to use Zillow, don't use Zillow, but don't complain when they have rules. Imagine if Amazon banned a seller from offering a product on their own website first. That's what Zillow is doing in real estate. Consumers should have the right to choose how they sell their homes. Well, that's a BS way of looking at it. Selling a house is not like Amazon. It's more like buying and selling stocks. Let's think about it that way. Everybody tells us that buying and selling real estate is the biggest financial decision and biggest financial deal you'll ever make in your life. So it's more akin to buying financial stocks and bonds than it is to buying a piece of Tupperware on Amazon. That's consumer goods versus financial matters. I'm not aware of any brokerage house in the investment realm where that controls the buying of stock. So if I want to go buy Zillow stocks or, hey, even Compass stocks, if I want to go buy stock from Compass, there's not one brokerage house that has the exclusive right to sell them. I mean, I don't have to go to Charles Schwab or Merrill Lynch to go get Compass. I can use anybody I want because it's open to everybody. Could you imagine if the NASDAQ was only available for 30 days through certain people, and then after 30 days, then you could get to see the stocks? It was just simply not work. And I think that's the same way here. So I don't think his comparison is really genuine. Redfin has also joined Zillow in banning private listings that are publicly marketed. If you have a private listing, then you're not going to be able to be on Redfin or Zillow's page. And if you'll look back, NAR just a few months ago, they weighed in on it and they kept the clear cooperation policy, which stipulates all properties must be listed within 24 hours on the MLS, within 24 hours of your marketing. They do allow for certain delayed exemptions, which is how it should be. Compass tries to argue that this is not a big deal. And when they argue it, it kind of just doesn't seem right. It says that their initial plan, and we'll talk about their plan in coming weeks, is that you put it on their internal platform where it can be viewed by Compass agents and their clients. Again, you're severely limiting the number of potential buyers by only limiting to people who work at Compass. And it's only people who work at Compass in that particular market who are looking at that market. And it's actually Compass agents who actually do anything. So those Compass agents who don't even sell, it doesn't really matter. The second phase then moves it to listing it publicly as coming soon, and it's not yet on the MLS. Well, that violates many MLS rules. You can't have coming soon on the CMLS, as many others have prohibited it. But ultimately, Compass said that 94% of its seller clients use the company listing strategy, ultimately list their homes. Then why are you pushing 100% of people to do it? I mean, your whole statement here kind of argues against what you're trying to do. You're trying to put 100% of your listings in-house through Compass, through this program, which you say only 6% ultimately use. So why are you delaying 94% of your listings from the open market? How is that good for the consumer? The answer of it is not. And Zillow knows it's not. It says at the heart of this issue is a simple principle. When a listing is publicly marketed, it should be accessible to all buyers across all platforms, including Zillow. The company said hiding listings creates a fragmented market. Yes, it does. It limits consumer choice 1,000%, and it creates barriers to ownership. I've been talking about fair housing all day, which is bad for buyers. Yes, because buyers can't get the properties they want to buy. It's bad for sellers. Yes, because they can't sell the property and they sell it for less money in the industry at large, which especially is important right now with the inventory and affordability constrained environment. Yeah, all 100% right. Everything Zillow says is correct there. Our listing access standards are designed to ensure transparency, equal opportunity, and broad visibility for everyone so sellers can maximize price in time to sell, and so buyers have access to all available inventory. Limiting visibility hurts buyers and sellers, disadvantages small brokerage, and undermines an open market. Our focus remains on creating a level playing field that serves the best interest of everyone in the home buying and selling journey. How can he argue against that? He can't. He knows it's true. All he can constantly say is consumer choice. And again, the only time I've ever seen a consumer say, I don't want to be on the MLS is when they're a victim of domestic violence. Or maybe they're a police officer and they don't want people to know where they live. It's very rare. This lawsuit concerns me because if Compass wins, then what Compass will do is consolidate more and more of its listings and eliminate people's ability to see the listings, which will affect sellers and buyer. So I think this case is very important. We all need to be following it. And we all, in my opinion, need to hope that Compass loses. Second lawsuit is a stupid lawsuit. It's against flex agents. And what they're looking at here is the law firm and the Morrell case, the commission lawsuit that was part of that Sitzer Burnett and the big class action lawsuit. They allege that Zillow's listing portal uses deceptive and illegal practices to inflate homeowner costs. And anytime a lawyer says something inflates home buyer costs, you know they're full of crap. What inflates home buyer costs is all this government regulation. Talk about FinCEN. Now, because I have a homeowner who wants to transfer the property from he and his wife's name to their trust for zero consideration, we have to fill out a 2.5-hour form that's going to take the consumer about 4 or 5 hours to put together. And I've got to charge the consumer for this nonsense, all under the guise of, hey, we want to stop money laundering. I don't know how many people money launder for $0, but apparently some people money launder $0, I guess. But that's where you can talk about saving homebuyer costs, but that's not what anybody wants to talk about. So we're going to go after Zillow on this stupid lawsuit. And what this is about is when a potential buyer is on a Zillow website, they see a picture of the house, they see the write-up of the house, and up in the right-hand corner, there's a big old blue button that says, want to see the house, contact agent. And if you're an agent that's part of the Zillow Flex program, then Zillow, they will send you the lead and you give them a 40% share of the commission, a referral fee. What they say is that the payment on the back end is undisclosed. Ooh, it's undisclosed to the parties. When you buy a new car, is it disclosed to you how much that salesperson is getting in commission? Is it disclosed to you how much Lexus or Honda or whoever is selling the car is paying that dealership as a bonus? Is any of that money ever shared with you? Do you have any idea? No, of course not. But for some reason, everybody thinks in the real estate industry, you have to disclose all that stuff. I don't know why it's anybody's business where you pay referral fees after the closing. What does that have to do with anything? But apparently Sitzer Burnett case was going to bring a potential problem for that, because I think that's what a Catchmark thinks, is that somehow when you're paying a referral fee to somebody, you should have to disclose that because, as he says, it inflates home buyer costs. No, it doesn't. Your fee's your fee, whether you pay the money or not as a referral. You don't raise your fees to cover that referral. That's not how it works in real estate. It just doesn't. But his complaint is when you click the blue button on Zillow, that it doesn't send you the listing agent. It sends you to one of Zillow's agents who winds up paying them a commission. So what? On Zillow's page, it has a listing agent and it has where that listing agent worked. I mean, it doesn't even hide it. It's there. You can click on it and go straight to all their information. What the button does is just put you in contact with a buyer's agent. So how does that raise your money and how is that deceptive? First of all, who in the right mind would think it's going to send you to the seller's agent? The listing agent is the seller's agent. So why am I clicking a button saying, take me to the seller agent so the seller agent can work for the seller and against me? I mean, where is that going to save you money? And I don't know how they are saying that somehow this would save you money by working directly with the listing agent. Well, if you are, you're now in dual agency and therefore they cannot advocate on your behalf to get you a lower price. However, let's say that you stay in customer service and the listing agent has client service with the seller. The seller is represented by the listing agent whose job it is to get the best deal for the seller. They're not going to do anything to help you drive the price down. In fact, they're going to try to do everything to drive the price up. So you going to the listing agent would actually inflate your home buyer cost. You going to another agent who would actually help you negotiate is going to drive your cost down. But apparently nobody understands real estate in any of these lawsuits. But even outside of that, how does that matter? What does that do to your buyer's costs? You're not required to use this agent. Clicking on the agent doesn't automatically sign you up. You don't like the agent, you can get another. You can interview as many agents as you want. You can use any agent that you want. You're not required to use anything. Nowhere does it say you have to use that agent. And whatever that agent charges you is fully negotiated. You get to negotiate it as a buyer. But here's the big part. You also get to negotiate it with the seller. It's all negotiated. So for them to sit here and try to claim now it inflates home buyer prices when the commissions are negotiated between the buyer and the buyer's agent, and then ultimately, in most cases, between the buyer and the seller, how is that possibly inflating home buyer costs? An absolute crappy lawsuit. Third lawsuit is the CoStar lawsuit. I'm not going to spend but a second on this one. CoStar, which is the parent company of Homes.com, alleges that Zillow stole 4,600 of their copyrighted images and put them on their website. They filed a lawsuit over the copyright infringement and claims that even 5,000 new photos have been on their website since the lawsuit. So that one's going to cost, if that's true, could cost Zillow a lot of money. On the other one, let me go back for the flex agent one. The reason that that case is important to you as an agent, you're like, well, I'm not a flex agent. What do I care? Well, it just shows you how quickly portals can change. And if these guys are correct and they're able to set aside this process here and get rid of this flex program, this just once again proves wherever you get your leads, all it takes is some lawyers saying that somehow you inflated their costs and those leads can be shut down forever. And that's what's scary about that lawsuit. If they are able to succeed against Zillow, then what does that mean for Realtor.com and Redfin and every other place that generates leads? Why could they not just go after those and say, because they generate leads and you've got to push money back to them and there's a button that sends you to this agent, they're all deceptive. All lead programs could be at risk. And that's my problem with that. Lastly, let's talk about these federal intervention cases. So the FTC filed a lawsuit, which also should scare you if you're a lead dependent agent. What Zillow did is they paid $100,000 to Redfin and asked them to shutter all of its ad efforts for multifamily properties and to actually start syndicating the Zillow listing. And what the regulators said was that this violates antitrust laws because it suppresses competition in these rental advertisement markets. And there's a great article written by a real estate broker named Josh Reese, R-I-E-S, on Inman News. He said he saw the same thing happen with Facebook. He said back when he first started getting on Facebook, it was a lead generation machine for him. And he was getting consistent buyer seller leads. He was scaling it like crazy. And he had a great trend. Everything was working great. And then Facebook introduced a housing category restrictions for ads. They limited demographics, target for housing, employment, and credits. And essentially his entire system became obsolete overnight. And all the ad levers that he was now getting were no longer being pulled on his behalf. And the program and platform changes essentially broke his machine. And we see that on Instagram. We see that on YouTube. All of these things that you lead heavy on for leads can go away in a minute's notice if the platform changes or if the government comes in and demands platform changes. And that's what's scary about this FTC suit is that it's not a private lawsuit, which takes a lot of time to work through and the jury gets to decide. Here, you got a federal government you got to deal with. And whether they win or not on this one, they'll come back for the second bite of the apple. Usually when the government tells me something's needed, I automatically realize it probably isn't needed because government always oversteps their authority in these things and makes things a lot worse. So rarely do I see government fix anything. And so here we have a situation where you could literally see the government come in and change how Zillow operates, which could lead to big problems for people who get leads through Zillow. But if they can do it to Zillow, they can do it to your lead program as well. And right after this, of course, we saw a lawsuit be filed by the attorney generals in Virginia, Arizona, New York, Washington, Connecticut, and they sued Zillow and Redfin over the exact same thing, over this, saying that they were removing competition. And so they've asked for an injunction to stop this agreement and to eliminate this consolidation in the rental industry. So again, if you go back to the fact that the government now is getting in business here of telling Zillow how to conduct itself, it starts getting very scary. I think our two big risks in real estate is that somehow Compass wins this lawsuit or makes Zillow change its rules and listings are kept in-house by Compass, and maybe anywhere, if that's the route they go in this merger, you could see 40%, if not more, of all listings go private for 30 days. And that's going to be terrible for fair housing and access to listings. It's going to be devastating to small brokerages. The second problem I see here is that if we look at this case on the flex agent, and you look at that with the FTC case, it does start making you very concerned that either through private action or through government action, that these referral platforms could be compromised, could be shut down completely or massively changed in how they operate. So if you are getting your leads through any type of lead platform, this is of concern. So these are some cases that we need to be watching over the next couple of months. Just like I did with Sitzer Burnett, we were talking about Sitzer Burnett a full year before Sitzer Burnett was settled. People had never even heard the word Sitzer Burnett. We were talking about it on Dish and Dirt. We'll be talking about these cases, keeping you up to date, letting you know where your risk is, letting you know when you need to worry. Right now, these are something we need to monitor and keep an eye on, and hopefully they'll go our way and we won't have to worry about it. But if they do go against us here, I do believe these are going to be some big structural changes coming through Zillow, which will affect all agents down the line, not just those who reflect agents. Well, that's all the time we have for our show today. Hope everybody got some good information about Zillow out of it, and I hope you'll come back again next week for another episode of Dish and Dirt. Please like us, subscribe to us, and share us with all your fellow real estate agents. Y'all have a great weekend. Take care.